Great to be here again. It's been maybe 8 months, I think, since I was here last, so it's wonderful to be with you. So we're going to start a 4-week series on the book of Esther. That's what we're doing today. And we're going to look at the first 2 chapters this morning. So next slide, if we could have it. Let's start by reading. It's a captivating story. Next slide. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes, the Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Kush. And Kush is really present-day Egypt all the way to Sudan and down into Ethiopia. Maybe can we have the next slide? So that's the size of that empire. And you picture where the Mediterranean is. It goes all the way from half of the Roman Empire all the way to the border of China. So it is the largest empire in the ancient world, bigger than the Roman Empire, just in terms of square miles. And the number of people groups, I think it's 126, as we saw. So we can back up a couple slides. Okay, At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. Next slide. After a full 180 days, so I had a 180-day banquet. I think I've read this passage a dozen times or more, maybe 20 times in the last couple of years, and just this morning I thought, 180-day banquet? Holy smokes, that's some serious leisure time. And he displayed his vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave another banquet, lasting 7 days, in the enclosed gardens of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material, and silver rings on the marble pillars. So this is Donald Trump scale bling. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in her royal palace of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when the King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, that's a nice way of putting it. The police pull you over and say, Mr. Nystrom, have you been having some high spirits? That's a friendly way to put it. When King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Memuman, Bertha, Hakana, Bigta, I can't even read that far back, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carlos, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. So that's an interesting marriage dynamic. I'm just going to bring her out to display her beauty, I think because it reflects something on me that I'm looking to establish. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Next slide. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king, these same fellas. The 7 nobles of Persia and Media who had special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. According to the law, what must be done to Queen Vashti, he asked. She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then Memucan replied in the presence of the king and of the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, so that they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. So what do you think of that? This is a group experience right now. What do you think of that? What strikes you? Pardon? Melania Trump. Yeah, there's some. Yeah, that is really interesting because there's stuff going on, the verbal signals there. I think. Yeah. This very day, the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end to their disrespect and discord. Therefore, if it please the king, let him issue a royal decree. Let it be written in the law of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of the king Xerxes. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. And when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast reign, all the women will respect their husbands from the least to the greatest. The king and his nobles were pleased with this advice, so the king did as Memuman proposed. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, and to each people in their own language, proclaiming that every man should be ruler over his own household using his native tongue. Chapter 2. Later, when King Xerxes' fury had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what he had done and what he had declared about her. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all the beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the young women who pleased the king be queen instead of Vashti. The advice appealed to the king. You would understand that would appeal to the king. The advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because he had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's order and the edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought into the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther was also taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was doing and what was happening to her. Before a young woman's turn came to go into the king, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with the myrrh and 6 months with perfume and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given to her from the harem in the king's palace. In the evening, she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to the care of Shabaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When the turn came for Esther, the young woman Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abigail, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested, and Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Teleth, in the 7th year of his reign. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any other woman, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with great liberality. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. During this time, Mordecai was sitting in the king's gate. Bigthana and Tersai, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. Yeah, these folks were renowned in ancient history for not just for being great warriors, but for being utterly inhuman in how they tortured you if you were captured in battle. So the basic idea, if you're going to fight them, you want to be killed in battle and not captured, because they'd make it a whole lot worse. So impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of the annals of the presence of the king. So what do you notice? Those are the first two chapters. This is the group participation portion. So anything strike you? Yeah. How interesting. Yeah, the king actually followed what his advisor said. Yeah. Anything else? Yes. Yeah. So she's got some, yeah, it's wise, some street smarts. Anything else? Yep. Women are smart. Yeah. And there's a corollary there. Men are... Yeah, warriors. Next slide. So a couple of conclusions right away. The few and the powerful get their way, right? The few and the powerful get their way. It's a pretty steep pyramid. Even in our country, it's a pretty steep pyramid. But for most of human history, it's been an incredibly steep pyramid. So there was a famous scholar of the Roman Empire 50 years ago, and he wrote a book titled The Roman Middle Class. Well, the Roman middle class was the equestrian order, and they composed, there's about 300 million people in the Roman Empire when Jesus was alive. The equestrian order composed 0.1% of the population. The highest order, the senatorial order, was 1/100th of 1%. That means 99.89% of the population of the Roman Empire, 300 million people, were living below the middle class. The few and the powerful get their way. The powerful are often thoughtless and careless and indulgent and are guilty of indifference to the rest of us, and they're often men in history. Next slide. Thucydides, the great Greek historian, really the first historian, the first one who tries to understand why events happen the way they do, who tries to understand human passions, human desire, what human beings are like, to explain what happens in history. He says, or he puts in the mouths of the Athenians, they're in the middle of the Peloponnesian War, this war between Athens and Sparta on the other hand, and the war hasn't been going too good. they're a couple years into it, and they're kind of at a stalemate. And the Athenians send some troops to this little tiny island called Melos. It'd be sort of like the United States like ganging up on Guyana and saying, we need you to be in our alliance, and we're going to force you to do it. And the Melians say, leave us alone. There's like 12 of us, We can't help you. And the Athenians say this, we didn't invent this law, but we find it everywhere at work. The strong do what they want, and the weak just have to take it. Isn't that true? That's certainly going on here with the king. Next slide. Power is sometimes, maybe most of the time, capricious and careless. Justice doesn't always win. Now, the Hebrew word for justice is mishpat. And that means, that's how it gets meted out. Tzedakah is typically understood as righteousness. And the idea is a decision can be just, but not right. And so God sticks his thumb on the scales and pushes them down so they're right. Now that's the image of justice that we have, right? Justice is blind. So Lady Justice is holding a scale in one hand, and it's supposed to be even, and she's got a sword in the other, meaning she gets to mete out punishment, and she's blindfolded. You're supposed to treat every human being the same. But of course, it doesn't actually always work that way. Next slide. Third, it's important to stand up for honor and for what is right, even when it might threaten your health, even when you might put you in jeopardy. Someone has got to step up for what's right. And that's what's going to be the story of Esther. So this Latin phrase, fiat justia pereat mundus, that was the Romans at their best. It means let justice be done even if the world perishes. Justice is a high enough virtue, a high enough good, that if we give up on that, then we're no longer really human. We're no longer really made in God's image. All we're saying is, all that matters is power and money and who you can push around. Kind of reminds me of the pay-only fast lanes and the freeway system in the Bay Area. I don't know. I don't have one of those, whatever those are, those fast track things. Yeah. Next slide. But I've also heard this: no good deed goes unpunished. No good deed goes unpunished. So I hope what's forming in your mind is that this is a story that reflects the world, I think, as we know it. That things don't work out the way they're supposed to. That there's inhumanity and injustice in our world. Next slide. So our world is like us. It's capable of kindness, but it can get twisted. So this thought occurred to me this morning at 5 a.m., so maybe it wasn't the best time to do that. But there was this movie that came out, I just remembered it, like 30 years ago, that I saw when I was living in Chicago, called Falling Down. I don't know if anyone ever saw it. It's got Michael Douglas in it. And he's this, it was right after the Soviet Union fell, so he was in the defense industry, and you know how they just downsized crazy, like 80% of people lost their jobs, so he lost his job, but he was so embarrassed he would leave the home every day with a briefcase with nothing in it, and he just felt like his world was crumbling, and as he was walking around downtown LA or somewhere in LA, there was some car crash, and not very likely, but the trunk of one of the cars involved in the crash opened up, and a big gym bag was thrust out of the trunk, and you open it up, and it's full of like automatic weapons. And so he picks them up, and he goes to like a McDonald's. Not really a McDonald's, but it was clearly a McDonald's ripoff. And all he wants is a McBreakfast. And the nice kid behind the, like the typical kid at a McDonald's, like first job, we got to wear the hat, And he wanted a breakfast sandwich. And this nice teenager said, "I'm sorry, sir, but we stopped serving those at 10. And it's 10:01. And he says, come on, it's 10:01. And he says, the manager comes and says no. And then he, without really kind of realizing what he's doing, he pulls out this submachine gun. And then he ends up, he doesn't kill anybody in the store, but it's just so interesting. As he's walking along, he realizes that he's capable of tremendous evil. And at the end, he says, "I'm the bad guy? I'm the bad guy? I've been trying to do everything right all my life, and I'm the bad guy?" Yeah. This is a story about exile. And nowhere in this book does anyone pray to God. God's not even mentioned. Now, God's a major player in the Exodus story. God's a major player in Daniel. So it isn't that God isn't present, because the Hebrews know that God's always present. God's always with us. God's always alongside of us. So God is just not mentioned, but he's always just below the surface. And this, I think, is a book which is wanting to help us understand that this world is not our home. We are citizens of heaven. That's what the New Testament says. We're urana politai. Uranos is the Greek word for heaven. So we're uranu politai. We're citizens of heaven. And we're ambassadors here, right? So Paul says. An ambassador lives in a country not their own. They represent the country they're from. And if they're any good at it, as an ambassador, they have affection and care for the people in the country they're living in. So this is a book which says, understand the world you're in, and understand the task that God has given you. Next slide. So Esther is an alluring book. The story is captivating, characters are sharply drawn. There's intrigue and danger and justice and ambition and suspense. Next slide. Jewish people are under threat and they're far from home. So how does one live in a culture not open to one's faith? Or even worse, one that's actively hostile to it and hostile to you? Next slide. Yeah, so they're under threat, they're far from home, they knew something of exile. They had captivity in Egypt, Daniel in the lion's den. But as I said, what's fascinating here is there's no overt mention of God in this book. Next slide. But vibrant faith is everywhere just below the surface. So what is this book trying to convey to us? Next slide. Well, adversity is at our door. All the time. All the time. And as I learned a couple of years ago, as some of you remember, certainly when you're driving, you're like 2 seconds away from some serious disaster. But God is at work. So let us place ourselves in God's service, not in the service of ourselves. So we need to be clear-eyed about the context and willing to serve the cause of the kingdom in the world we live in. And there's a powerful and capricious king. That sound familiar? And there are consequences to challenging power. How do you survive in a hostile environment? And there are sycophants, those who are willing to suck up to the powerful king. Next slide. And there are clear enemies. How might God want to direct you and me if and when we find ourselves in a position of privilege and or power? How did Esther do? What was her plan? What was her strategy? What did she do right? What do you think she might have done well? Maybe just a little bit short of right. Next slide. And there's danger. There's tremendous danger in our culture because our culture throws all kinds of stuff at us and says, you deserve it. How do you say loyal to your principles? How do you advise someone who's in a tight spot? How do you decide to take a chance? What to do if you find yourself in a position of honor or influence? Next slide. And what is the big lesson? Is it we can and should trust in God's providence even when things look bleak? Is it that God can make good come out of what looks like hopelessly a bad situation? Is it good we ought to trust in God's providence even when things look great instead of trusting in ourselves? And what about the who knows, maybe for such a time as this? So this is a book that invites us to think about surprise, unpleasant surprise. Lord, what are you trying to teach me in this? That's what we often say. Maybe we also want to say, Lord, what do you have for me in this? It seems to be saying, if you look, you might see that maybe the hand of God is at work here, and that maybe you are God's agent. And what's the theology of Esther? God's not mentioned, not even once. What does that tell you? Well, he's always present. And if, as we know, the Holy Spirit lives in our hearts, well, then God is always present, whether he's mentioned or not. We bring God with us wherever we go, to whatever hostile situation. And people have no clue sometimes that you're bringing God into their midst. Wouldn't that change the way we think about our day when we have that in mind? So God sometimes works through ordinary means, and Mordecai, the Jews are in exile. They're in Mesopotamia, a long way from home. Next slide. Yeah, I guess I like that slide a lot. They're a long way from home. They have no temple. They have no prophet. They have no city. They have no religious schools. Next slide. The books written after the return from exile, Chronicles, Nehemiah, Ezra, Haggai, Zechariah, face the question, are we still God's people? Are we still the covenant people? And the answer is yes. Next slide. Esther asks the same question, but from the context of exile itself, not after the return. And the answer Esther gives is also yes. And the answer for us in exile is yes. We are God's people. We do not, this is not our home. Our home is in Christ, and we are ambassadors here. So let us walk out of this place full of confidence, because even though the world doesn't acknowledge God, we know, and we know the future is in his hands. Let's walk out in confidence and say, Lord, help me to be more excited about your plan for me than my plan for me. And let us, well, I'd like to ask you to just look around the room and look at each other in the eye. So let us commit that we are going to be in love with these people, and they're going to be in our prayers as we together seek to be God's people in a land of exile. Amen?